Hey everyone, if you're new here, my name is Sarah and I'm the owner of Peppo Studios, which is a itty bitty little teeny tiny small business that I've started creating surface pattern designs using hand-painted watercolor elements. So if this is your first time watching one of these videos, basically I'm documenting all of the little steps that I'm taking to get towards the big goals that I've set out for myself as I kind of go through this journey of creating this business from nothing. So we're still in the pretty early stages now, but this is my fifth or sixth, let me check. I think this is my sixth big goals, little steps video. So that's kind of exciting. It's happening. And I'm doing these every 2 weeks. Basically the way these work is that I'm going to start by going over what I had set out to do in the past 2 weeks, let you know how I did on those, and then lay out my new goals for the next 2 weeks, all kind of working towards these big picture goals that I have for my business. I tend to ramble a lot in these, so I'm just gonna jump right into it and we're gonna get started with the goals that I laid out for myself in the past 2 weeks. Okay, so if you've been watching my other videos, you'll know that I'm taking Immersion, which is Bonnie Christine's kind of flagship course that she teaches, and it's a really intensive 8-week course in surface pattern design and creative entrepreneurship. And so that started early March. We are in early April now, so we're about a month in. And it certainly is immersive. It's something that takes a lot of my time. And I knew this going in, and I've said this in the past few videos. It's like the goals that I'm setting out for myself, for my business, are kind of tweaked a little bit. I'm basically giving myself fewer goals outside of Immersion because Immersion's taking a lot of my time. And it's all good things because Immersion, like this course, is basically setting me up to do all the things that I really would like to do in this industry. So all the time that I'm spending on this course is worth it, and it's productive, and it is moving me forward and towards these kind of big goals that I have. But in the last big goals, little steps video, I had given myself the goal of finishing up through module 3 by the time I filmed today's video. And I did that. It's great. Yesterday I finished module 3. So if you're not in Immersion, or if you're not familiar with kind of what we learn in that course, basically module 1 was like an introduction to Adobe Illustrator. So it was designed for people who have never, both people who have never used Illustrator before and people who have. And there's even people who are in the course who, like, you'll hear it all the time in their testimonials, but also like the people, like my classmates, you know, the people who are in the course with me are saying things like, oh, I've been using Illustrator for 20 years. And like, even in this module 1, I've learned tips and tricks and stuff that I like didn't know about. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. But yeah, it's pretty high level, not really high level, but like you don't get into designing or pattern making really at that stage. So that was module 1. Module 2 was Adobe Illustrator Advanced, so it was kind of going in depth a bit more with some of the stuff that you learned in module 1. And at this point, you get into the point of like learning how to create motifs and stuff like that to use in patterns. Module 3 then was, I think it's called Pattern. There's also been bonus modules, things like vectorizing textures and adding textures to your designs and your illustrations, things like the history of pattern making, and like a gesture drawing one that I still haven't taken. So anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff, but all this to say, I did achieve this goal and I did complete through module 3. So that's really exciting. It's something that takes a lot of time in my week because I said this in the last video, but each module so far has been around 4 hours of video content. And that's just the video, you know, and you're going to spend a lot more time than that actually implementing the skills that you're learning in the video. And so, yeah, it does take a good amount of time. Like I would say you could definitely set aside 8 to 10 hours a week to put into Immersion, which might not sound like a lot, but like, you know, I work a full-time job. And so when I'm spending 1 to 3 hours after work on a given day on Immersion stuff, like it's most of your evening, you know, so it does take quite a bit of time. Maybe I'm just saying that to justify why like my goal list is shorter, just to say like this was a big goal to kind of keep up with my Immersion stuff, and I'm like up to date. So module 4 comes out on Monday, which is really exciting. Today's Sunday, so tomorrow it'll come out, and it feels good to be kind of caught up. Now that said, I think that there's a lot in this course that I'm going to go back to and like continue. I've already been like rewatching some stuff. But you know, if you've watched my other stuff, my other videos, or if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I really lean towards Photoshop for pattern making stuff. Like I really lean towards the raster world. And so I am even still going through Immersion. I'm still hesitant about vectors just because I don't know. I don't know that they like fit my style that well. And so all that to say, like I think that I need to put in the hours, like put in a lot more time to convince myself on the best way to use vectors and the best way to use them in my style. So, you know, that's something I'm working on and something that I think is going to take me longer than just going through Immersion. But anyway, all that to say, it does feel good to be caught up and to be all teed up to start Module 4 tomorrow. Okay, the second goal that I had set out to do the last 2 weeks had to do with a bunch of Spoonflower challenges. So there were a handful that I wanted to enter. So what I had laid out for myself to do was to enter the East Fork Butter and Piglet Challenge, the Abstract Animal Print Challenge, and then to have a first kind of draft done of my Doodlebugs challenge. And so I'm going to start with that East Fork challenge. If you're not in the Spoonflower design challenge world, basically Spoonflower is a print-on-demand website where you can print fabric goods using your uploaded designs. Every week they host these design challenges, which have a specific prompt, and then thousands of designers around the world submit designs for these challenges. And so I have previously entered one challenge before this video. I think I showed it in a previous video which one I submitted, but this East Fork Butter and Piglet Challenge had to do with this pottery company that's called East Fork. They're really awesome. You should look them up if you haven't heard of them. I had not heard of them, but they're great. They make beautiful, beautiful products, and they do really good stuff too in the world and in their community. But anyway, they have two new seasonal glaze colors called Butter and Piglet. It's like a light yellow and a light pink. And basically they said, use these two colors as the dominant colors in your design. You can use like up to 2 other neutral colors, but like these should be the shining stars. And yeah, I talked about this a little bit in my last video, but I told you in that last video that I would wait until this one to kind of go through the many iterations of designs that I went through kind of to get to my final design. So I will do that here. I'll try and tell you an abridged kind of version of what happened in the interest of having these videos be less than half an hour. But basically, I knew that I had to specifically use these 2 colors. Like there are 2 specific hex codes that you have to use. And I also knew that my style, as I mentioned before, is typically not super heavily vectorized. Like I really like the hand-painted style for my kind of work. So I started by painting some pigs, some little piglets, and then I actually painted some apple blossoms because they had some in their about page on their website. They mentioned the apple blossoms. Anyway, I had little piglets and apple blossoms, and they were pretty cute paintings, and I painted them in colors that I have that I feel like are close-ish to Butter and Piglet, but it didn't really matter because I knew I was gonna have to digitally change them anyway. But after I painted those, I realized that I did not know how to do that in Photoshop. Like I did not know how to kind of color match, not really color match, but how to turn my painted works into a specific color using like a hex code. I do know now that it's possible. It's something called color indexing, and I have kind of started to dabble, and I'm certainly going to talk about that more in like upcoming videos. But at the time when I was doing this Butter and Piglet East Fork challenge, I did not know that that existed. So I was like, well, I know how to do this in Illustrator. I know how to do this if I vectorize these. So let me try that. So I brought them into Illustrator and I vectorized them. And I was struggling, as I always do when I vectorize my paintings, because I'm like, this is just not what I had in mind. Like, this is not, you know, I don't know. I struggle with it a little bit. They were cute. The little piglets, some of them turned out pretty cute in Illustrator. And I can show you the original vectors just to show you kind of what they looked like. And then in Illustrator, it's pretty easy to specifically change your colors, and so I played with a few combinations of like the key colors and then some additional neutrals. And basically, long story short, I put together a few patterns, and I'll show you them here, and I did not like them. I was just not feeling it. And maybe looking back at them now, they're cute and they're fine, but I don't know, it's just like not what I had in mind. And it was one of those things where I stayed up late like working on it, and I was like, oh, I don't like the way that it turned out. This is not my style, not my thing. So this was on like a Friday night and I was bummed out. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And then I posted about this on my Instagram and I said this in my last video. Friday night, I was like, maybe I'm gonna have a great idea overnight, like while I sleep. And I woke up on Saturday morning, I was like, I gotta go, I have this great idea. Good morning, everyone. Okay, updates. So if you watched my show last night, you know I was working on the Spoonflower challenge, which is called Butter and Piglet, and there's like 2 specific colors that we have to use. And I've been struggling with this so hard. I like spent hours yesterday playing with like a bunch of different ideas, and I just wasn't loving it. And then late last night, I posted on my story and I was like, ugh, I'm just gonna sleep on it. I'm gonna see if I come up with any brilliant ideas while I'm asleep. And I did. I seriously, when I woke up this morning, I was like, I got it. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm so excited. Now, no promises. It might not turn out the way that I have it in my head, but this seriously happens all the time. I actually dream about surface pattern design like several nights a week, but this one I'm really excited about. So let's see where this goes. And basically my great idea was to do these rosy maple moths, which if you have seen this, they are really cute. They're kind of pink and yellow, perfectly kind of pastel colored moths, and I see them in the summertime and I was like, oh, this is genius. This is perfect for me because I love painting animals and bugs, and the colors were perfect. So anyway, long story short, basically I took those and I turned them into a pattern instead. And then this here is my final resulting pattern. I like the way it turned out. Like, I played with some different ways to add more contrast. For me personally, I was cool with it not having contrast. Like, I kind of liked the soft look for this one. I liked it. People responded well to it on my Instagram. It was really cute. It ended up in the top 25% of the challenge, so that's kind of cool. Like I said, thousands of people enter these, so to stand out, you have to do something bold, and like this one maybe wasn't that bold. But anyway, it was cool, a cool learning experience, and it is currently the only vectorized pattern that I have in my Spoonflower design library, so it was a cool learning experience. So that was the East Fork challenge. But that wasn't the only Spoonflower challenge I wanted to enter. There were a couple others. So the next was the abstract animal print challenge. I went through this whole story on my Instagram stories, but basically I was struggling hard with this. I tried like 4 different iterations of things. I painted like different kinds of butterflies, separate like butterfly wings. I tried like a school of different tropical fish in like really bright colors, and like I tried painting some crazy colored leopard spots, and like basically the challenge was meant to be an animal print, like an abstract animal print, like, you know, leopard spots or tiger stripes or giraffe spots or something like that. And I just really struggled to only paint the print. Like, I am so drawn to painting the whole animal, and maybe I'll come back to the print. Like, I'll try that again at some point. But I was like, this is just not my thing. So I ended up, the night before it was due, I was like, what about betta fish? Because betta fish are beautiful. They have such cool colors, and like some of them have kind of crazy patterns. And I was like, okay, it's not going to be just the print, but it will showcase their cool prints. And that's what I did. So I can show you here the final pattern that I came up with for that and that I submitted. And I think it's pretty cool. I actually ended up rescaling this and posting a few different scales again in my Spoonflower design library, which I will link below. I haven't done that historically, but I'll put that in the description below if you want to look. So that's something that was kind of cool. It is ongoing right now, that challenge. So I don't know what other people think about it, but that was a pretty fun one. So there's another Spoonflower challenge between that abstract animal print and then the doodle bugs, which I'll get to, that I wasn't going to enter. It's called like dollhouse wallpaper or something like that. The idea is that you're designing wallpaper for a dollhouse, so small scale, like dainty or whatever. And I wasn't going to do this one, but yesterday I had an idea and I started playing with it. So I'll show you my first version of this. I'm still working on it, so we'll see where I land with this one, but I just wanted to document that yeah, I did an additional one that I didn't originally set out to do, so that's cool. And I mean, for me, I think any kind of forward momentum is good, even if it's not a specific goal that I had set out to do, especially with creating these patterns, because it's really helping me start to see like what I like, what I don't like. I'm playing with all kinds of new styles. So on a similar vein to that, I also tried a totally new kind of pattern making that I had done before, and that's using abstract watercolor paintings, which is unusual for me. I don't generally paint abstracts, but I decided to play with this and I love it. So it was really awesome. I'll show you here the pattern that I'm talking about. I first made this kind of like blobby abstracts that flow into each other, and then using the same color palette, I also made some droplets. They're also kind of abstract-y, like they're very messy and intentionally kind of blending together and stuff. So those were those two patterns, and they were inspired by this person I follow on Instagram. Her handle is MJM Studio. I will make sure that's true, and I'll put a link to her Instagram. But she has some really beautiful abstracts, and I saw her stuff and I was like, I want to try that just to see. Now, you got to be careful with this kind of stuff because you want to make sure that you're not like straight up copying other people, and you need to make sure that you're doing things in your own way and in your own style. But I had just, when I came across her Instagram, it blew my mind because I had never seen or paid attention to patterns that weren't isolated motifs, like individual things that you move around. When you look at her patterns, I was like, I literally can't tell where it starts and where it stops because it all blends together, which was crazy to me. I did not know how to do that at all, but I tried it out with my own stuff and it totally worked and it was awesome. And I really like the final result of this pattern. The painting took me like 6 minutes to do. Like, it was a really quick painting because it's just kind of some blobs. I picked 3 colors and I was like, I'm just gonna make blobs where I want them, and it was so quick. And I was using like my cheap materials that I have, and even the pattern to pull it together took like an hour maybe, and I love the way it turned out. And I made it in a few different colorways too, so I can show you. I made this like pinkish version, and then I made one that's pretty similar to the original but has kind of a red accent instead of a yellow one. So that was a pretty cool experiment for me, and that opened up a kind of a new pathway for me. Now that I realized that you can create these patterns without needing to have totally isolated motifs, that was blowing my mind a little bit. So there's a lot more to explore with that, but I just wanted to document that here, that like I played with this new technique and it was awesome. So I hope to go into that a little bit more over time. And also something I was thinking about is at some point, I think it would be cool to do some kind of like tutorials for the things that I'm really excited about and like new techniques that I'm learning. And I'm like starting to note down things that like I thought were really hard at the beginning, and now I'm like starting to figure out so that I can walk back and walk other people through those. So anyway, if you're interested in any of the stuff that I'm talking about, you know, like this cool blobby technique and stuff, that's something I may consider learning more about and then teaching y'all about if you have any interest in that kind of thing. So anyway, just like a little plug for a series that does not yet exist. Okay, one last note on Spoonflower before we move on. I told you I wasn't gonna ramble, and then here I am rambling. It happens. But the last thing was there's one more challenge that's called the Doodle Bugs Challenge, which I'm psyched about because it's like my ideal, which is it's meant to be traditionally created artwork. I'm sure they're really loose about that, but I think the idea is they're like, get out your watercolors, get out your colored pencils, like make something with traditional artwork. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of digitally painted stuff too, and digitally drawn stuff. But anyway, my whole jam is the hand-painted, like traditionally painted stuff. And I love bugs. My background is in ecology. I've done a lot of bug research in my past life and stuff, so I'm psyched about this. Now, my goal specifically was to have a first draft of that pattern done, and I have not done that. But I have started painting, and I'll show you some of the stuff I've painted. So this is, so obviously this is still pretty early on, and I'm still just like toying with ideas. So all of these are inspired by Michigan summers. I grew up in Michigan. I spent a lot of summers outside in Michigan. And so these are all bugs that I have hung out with a lot in the summers in Michigan. If you've spent any time up north in Michigan, you will recognize these mayflies for sure. They are everywhere in, well, June. You'd think it'd be May, I guess. Maybe May too. But anyway, so this is where I've started. I stalled out a little bit on those because I love painting on these bugs, and I don't have a solid vision in my head for the pattern yet. And I'm like, okay, will I create a beautiful pattern, or am I just painting a bunch of bugs that I like? So I need to find this balance of, yes, I'm like painting these bugs in a way that I think represents them, and that's more than just, I mean, I know I have some monarchs on here, but I think we're probably going to see a lot of butterflies and a lot of beetles, a lot of moths. So I wanted to showcase some of the bugs that are maybe less popular, but I still think are really cool. And at the same time, I have to find this balance of, well, that's cool, but can I make it a pattern that is interesting and beautiful and something that I would buy if I saw it on a product? So I'm gonna figure this out. Hang out with me on Instagram and I'll take you along with this process of figuring this whole thing out. But anyway, that's what I've done with that one so far, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, last goal that I had set out for the last 2 weeks. I know I've already been talking for a long time, but thank you for hanging on with me. Hopefully this is interesting if you are similarly kind of early in your business journey. I had set out the goal of creating at least one mock-up to use on my website. This was carried over from my previous Big Goals Little Steps. I did not achieve that in the previous 2 weeks. So I did this time, so that's the good news. I watched Mel Armstrong's mock-up class on Skillshare. If you've watched any of these videos of mine before, you know I love Mel Armstrong, and specifically I love her Skillshare classes. She's awesome. She teaches stuff in a really kind of straight to the point, simple way, and it's great. So she has a pretty short class on mock-ups, and I created a few mock-ups using her method. So I can show you some. Basically, I did this notebook, and then I did like a cushion, like a pillow for your couch, and then I did a t-shirt. And it was an interesting exercise because in doing this, I was like, okay, this is great that I'm learning how to make mock-ups. This is a super helpful and important skill to have in this industry. And also I was like, I'm not loving a lot of my designs on some of these, not yet. And so I was like, okay, I need to think about this because actually seeing my designs on real products has kind of shifted my thinking a little bit, because I'm like, I don't know that I am loving this thing. And it's like, I love the design. Like, for example, these betta fish that I have on this cushion. The design, I think, is cool. Like, I like my betta fish, but on this cushion, I'm like, it cannot be a stark white background. It's just not working for me. I need to at least have like an off-white or maybe like a blue because they're in the water or something like that. So anyway, I think it's been a really informative thing for me to make these mock-ups and put my products on it, or my patterns on them. And I'm hoping it'll change the way I think about creating my designs as I go forward, because ultimately the point of surface pattern design is to get your patterns on surfaces. And to do that, I need to make sure I like the way that my patterns look on surfaces. So it's one thing for them to look good on my Instagram feed or on Photoshop, but it's another thing for them to look good on a product. And so now that I know this mock-up situation, I'm gonna create some more and I'm gonna play with this. I'm gonna kind of test my patterns against this and see, okay, sure, it looks good on my Instagram feed, but how does it look on a journal or a wall hanging or like a shower curtain? I actually would really like to make a shower curtain mock-up because I think a bunch of my designs look great as shower curtains. But anyway, it's an interesting experiment to figure this out. And now I have a few templates that I can use on my website, which is great. I'm really looking forward to being able to quickly swap out my patterns in my mock-ups. But yeah, it's a good skill to have and something I'm gonna keep working on. So those were the goals that I set out for myself in the past 2 weeks, plus all those bonus things that I've done since then. So now we can get into the goals that I'm gonna set myself for the next 2 weeks. So the first one's really simple, and it's just to keep chugging along with Immersion. No one's surprised here, but the good news is we do have an implementation week coming up. So basically the structure of the course is 2 weeks of modules, so module 1, module 2, and then an implementation week. and then module 3 and module 4, and then another implementation week, and then modules 5 and module 6, and then that's the course. So like I said, module 4 is out tomorrow, so that means this coming week is module 4, and then next week is an implementation week. So that's good. That does give me time to implement all of the skills that I've gained over the past few modules, and will give me some more time to do what I had mentioned before about focusing more on how to use my style in vectorized art. So it's good. It'll give me a little bit more time to sit with this information, digest it, and apply it, implement these skills. So basically my goal between now and the next check-in is going to be just to finish module 4. I don't have any specific goals for implementation week, but it's just to stay on top of everything, and I'll let you know if I create any interesting vector art between now and then. Okay, the next goal I'm setting out for myself is just a couple more Spoonflower challenges. So as you know, I'm working on that Doodlebug challenge. Like I said, shameless plug for my Instagram account if you're interested in seeing my thought process as I go through the design process of this. I keep my Instagram stories regularly updated on this kind of stuff, which is so helpful. People are really kind on there and give me lots of feedback, and I love hearing people's inputs and thoughts on how I should do things, or how I should mock up things or whatever. So that's really cool. It's fun to see what you all have to think about that. So anyway, hang out with me on there if you're interested in seeing more progress, but ideally I will have an update for you in 2 weeks of what my final Doodlebugs pattern looks like. There are some additional Spoonflower challenges that have been released since the last time I checked in here. So they're the May challenges. I don't know how many of them I'm gonna commit to doing, but there is one that's kind of fun. It's called Birthday Table Linens or something like that. And it's cool. It's like tablecloth for a birthday party. And I'm excited about that. I think that's one that will be pretty fun. So I'll paint something, but I don't know if in the next 2 weeks I'm gonna have anything done with that or not, but maybe the goal would be to have something, something like this, a few things painted on paper, and see where my initial ideas are. Okay, I'm only gonna set myself one more goal for the next 2 weeks, because like I said, immersion's taking a lot of my time, and at this phase where I am right now, it's really helpful to give myself a little bit of wiggle room to allow for those things that fill the margins, like those abstract patterns that I came up with in the past 2 weeks. That's not a goal I had set out to do, but I had the flexibility to be able to do that, and it was awesome. I really loved it. So I'm gonna leave some space for things like that. But anyway, with that, my third and final goal that I'm setting out for myself does have to do with my website, so some admin kind of side of things, which if you've watched these other videos, I do really like working on my website. It's pretty fun. But I want to go back to my portfolio, and now that I've started creating these mock-ups, I want to update that portfolio part of my website. So my website's not live yet. Y'all will be the early to know when that website is live. I'll let you know as soon as it is published. But basically I want to update my portfolio using some of the mock-ups that I've created, and updating some of the designs that I've created as well. We'll see, sometimes when you get started with a website, it's a little bit of a rabbit hole and you can start updating all kinds of things. I recently was doing that sometime in the past week, and I started vectorizing my handwritten words to put throughout my website, and I love the way it looks. It's pretty awesome. So I got a little carried away, but it's fun. So I'm gonna give myself some wiggle room there too, but the kind of overarching goal there is to update my portfolio on my website. So those are all the goals that I am setting out to do in the next 2 weeks. It's a pretty short list, so hopefully it's pretty feasible. I'm giving myself a little bit of grace too, because I do have some travel coming up. So something I'm gonna have to figure out in terms of these video updates and my immersion work and stuff like that. But I do have some fun trips coming up in April and May. I will update you about those if it's relevant. But it's something I'm trying to plan around in terms of making sure I'm continuing to move the needle forward and make progress around the rest of the stuff going on in my life. So updates to come on that front. But as a recap, the 3 goals that I've set out for myself in the next 2 weeks is first to complete Immersion Module 4 and then that implementation week. So whatever additional work that means for me. Maybe that's going to mean creating a few vectorized patterns that I like if I can do that, I think that that's going to be a big success. Just making patterns that I like, because I know how to make patterns in Illustrator, but most of them I don't like that I create. So if I can make, at least one pattern that I like in Illustrator, I call it a success. Okay, my second goal I set out for myself has to do with some Spoonflower challenges. So first is to finish this Doodlebugs challenge, whatever that looks like. And then there's some additional challenges. So I talked about the birthday table linen challenge, getting some initial thoughts down for that one, and we'll see what else I come up with. And then my third and final goal for the next 2 weeks has to do with my website. Officially, I'm just saying I want to update my portfolio, but we'll see what other kind of can of worms that opens once I get started. So that is everything for this week. Thank you for hanging along. So many of you. I need to qualify this. I know how it sounds when you watch people on YouTube or whatever and they say, so many of you have reached out. You can get imposter syndrome, right? Because it feels like they're talking about like hundreds of people. I'm talking about maybe 5 to 10 people have reached out to me on Instagram, and it's so lovely. People have been reaching out to say they've found my videos, which is so sweet. I'm a really tiny channel. At this moment in time, I think I have 112 subscribers or something like that. But like the fact that 5 to 10 of you have like taken the time out of your day to reach out to me and say, hey, I found your YouTube channel. I'm at a similar stage in my business. Some of you are also taking Immersion. Like, it's been an awesome way to connect with you all, and it's really cool to meet these people who do have similar goals and similar dreams to me, because as we all know, in the real world, like in our real lives, it's kind of hard to make those connections and know people who kind of understand what we're trying to do. So it's a really cool thing, and thank you if you've reached out to me. Some of you reached out to me over email. In my last video, I mentioned I started a new professional email account, so you're certainly welcome to reach out to me there too. It's fun to help me practice my new fancy email. That's hello@peppostudios.com. if you're interested in sending me a note there too. But anyway, thank you if you've reached out to me or if you've left a comment here. You all are so sweet and so supportive, and it's just a really cool thing to be able to connect with you all this way. But with that, I will let you carry on with the rest of your day. Thank you for hanging out with me for this check-in, and I will be back in 2 weeks with another check-in for you. So in the meantime, take care everyone.